To order.
That was a good comeback.
It'd be great. Thank you. Supervisor Sokol is going to be a few minutes late, so we are going to call both meetings to order right now, and he will join us shortly. So if I could have a motion to approve the minutes from the last personnel meeting.
Will do.
Supervisor Leggett?
First and the second?
Yes, are you on both committees?
Well, I am.
You are?
No, I'm not
Oh.
on both committees, no. I'm not on the committee.
Well, okay, Supervisor Leggett approves the minutes from personnel, seconded by Supervisor Bramer. All those in favor?
Aye.
And can I
I'll
have
make
a
a
motion
motion.
by Supervisor Simpson to approve the minutes from finance, seconded by Supervisor Merlino? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So at this point, we'd like to call the personnel, the joint meeting of finance, personnel, and higher education together to order. And the purpose of this meeting is to have a presentation by Matt Schuett regarding our, is there something else we need to do right before that? Sorry.
Tourism director.
Ma'am, would you like to explain the motion that is needed to be passed this afternoon? Where's Joanne? Thank you.
Thank you. We looked at a job application through SUNY Adirondack that we were looking for an intern for the summer. The only applicant that we happen to have is a recent graduate. She graduated in December. So in order for her to work with us and not receive credit and not receive any monetary compensation, we just needed the Personnel Committee to approve the waiver that has been worked on by the county attorney.
Excellent. Could I have a motion to put that on the floor, please? Made by Supervisor Simpson, seconded by,
Tourism, I'm
Oh.
sorry.
seconded, or, so we can strike that. The motion is made by Supervisor Frazier, seconded by Supervisor Leggett. Is there any discussion?
Yes,
Supervisor McDevitt?
Just the underlying kind of thought of working with no compensation. Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? We're interested in saving taxpayer money, but at the same time, is there a fundamental issue of equity here? I personally think we ought to pay the person.
Supervisor
just
Frazier?
wondering what the person is aware she isn't getting paid. Did she, or she have a problem with that? If they didn't have a problem with it and they say, I'm good with working without pay, then...
Mhm. I think in this day and age, we're seeing a lot of students who want experience, or in this particular case, she had just graduated from college and was looking for that experience, but I'll let Joanne expand upon that.
Well, that is the case. She has just graduated and would like to get into the field and is just looking to understand a little bit more and to maybe network a little bit with the people that we network with within the department. She does understand that there would not be a monetary compensation. It's for a limited period of time. We thought it would be throughout the summer, and then we're hoping that in fall, an incoming or a fall student would be interested, and we'd just be able to keep up that rotation of having an intern each semester.
Great. Are there other questions regarding this? And just a point of clarification, our other internships typically will have credit, but non-paid. But they do typically receive credit for it. In this instance, that's not an option for her. Supervisor Merlino?
I agree with what you said. They don't, but she'll get, not credit from us, but she'll get credit on the resume that she spent 3 months, 5 months with the tourism department of Warren County.
I fully understand that.
That's where they're going to get a little bit, not paid, but a little back.
I understand.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Supervisor McDuffie opposed. That motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the second item on our agenda. At this point, we'd like to ask Matt Schuett to talk a little bit more about, following up from our last presentation, the committee had asked for a significant amount of time to go over some changes and proposed changes to be considered by both personnel and finance. So the floor is yours, Mr. Schuett.
All right. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. That was a real funny one, huh? All right. So, yes, thank you, Rachel. Following up from our last meeting, we had A lot to talk about surrounding the insurance program, prescriptions in particular, and we're going to take a deeper dive into that and some of the solutions that we want to put forth to you, some ideas, some concepts to consider. We have a couple pages in front of you, or you can follow on the monitors, whatever's easier. I'll try to keep up on the monitor side with the technology over here. So, quick introduction again. We always feel it's important to do this. I'm Matt Schuett. Kurt Jager's over here. We're going to probably chime in, off of each other occasionally from time to time. So as you turn in on the second page, this is what we're going to try to get through a great majority of this agenda. Obviously, I feel it's important to take a few minutes every meeting and go over, just do a quick State of the Union of the type of reminder of the type of plans that you have currently, and really why we're having this discussion on self-insured, considering self-insured and the objectives. So understanding a basic self-insured, current versus self-insured, your risk in both scenarios, in either, and then some solutions, and we have to discuss timelines. We're getting to the point here, and I'll just jump to it now since I'm on it. With a December 1st renewal, we really, and Kurt and I were chatting about it again today, we really, if you're going to go self-funded, or whatever direction you're going to go in, we're really going to have to make that commitment. I would say a final hard stop on that was going to be 60 days from now, just mid-August. Okay, if we get too far past that, it just gets too difficult to pull the trigger on that, to make the move. There's a lot that goes into moving to a self-funded program. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through that. So I'm going to skip around a little bit. If you turn with me to page 4, okay, this is, we've presented this. I feel it's good just to spend a few minutes on it again to review current versus what we could be considering. Okay, so current is on your left-hand side. Current is the particular program that you're in currently with Blue Shield, and it's a minimum premium contract. It's considered a fully insured contract on the medical side. This isn't the Blue Shield medical portion is different. Is fully insured. The prescriptions are self-insured, as you're aware of. And just various components of the minimum premium contract is you have a fixed portion. Right now, Blue Shield is charging. That's actually what the component of it is. The fixed portion at about $75 is $74.95 for a single person, as an example. That covers the administration of the program, ID cards, covering reinsurance, broker comp, things of that nature. If you go over to self-funding, on the right-hand side, you also have a component of administrative fees. As we had discussed in previous meeting, you still need an administrator. The county doesn't, you're not paying individual doctor claims directly yourself if you go self-funded. You're not, you're paying them through your administrator, being Blue Shield, as in this scenario. Employer liability, if you go to the second row, that's right now under a minimum premium fully insured contract. Blue Shield sets a claim maximum for you. That's the most that you could pay. I think some of you may be familiar with this in previous years. Some years you have a surplus, and other years you hit their maximum entirely. So Blue Shield sets that amount at what they expect claims to be plus 5%. Under a self-insured arrangement, you just have regular medical claims that we have to try to project where that target's going to be. The big one we want to talk about, and this we'll get into much more detail, the prescription plan is presently self-funded. We have developed a premium equivalent of $143.26. That's for a single person. That equivalent rate is a rate developed to set payroll deductions. It's a rate that's developed times all of your employees to collect enough, basically, to have a high enough of a target to cover what we would expect the claims to actually be. Okay? And we know right now, as previous discussion, this is the area that we spent a lot of time on last time. We'll do more today, that needs some reinsurance or some protection. Under a self-funded prescription, that is quite simply covered under one umbrella with your medical plan as stop loss. terminal liability. That's part of your plan today. That just covers if you were to leave your contract. This is important because this does affect your finances to some degree in the current arrangement. If you leave the minimum premium contract, Blue Shield collects a certain amount of money to cover claims that would be payable for the next 90 days, let's say, after December 1st, something of that nature. You don't have that arrangement necessarily under self-funding in that same capacity. We're going to go over much more in the advantages and the disadvantages as we go through this. That was just a quick highlight. We're going to do more of it. There's some listed down there, obviously the bigger ones being the reinsurance part of it as a risk now. Lasers and cash flow potentially under self-funding is a disadvantage. There are a number of advantages to consider on self-funding. We've done a little with this, but before we go and start to dig in a little deeper on the prescription side, certainly want to try to keep this interactive. What questions do we have at this stage regarding your current arrangement compared to self-funding? Okay. Good for now. All right, so next page, 5. So we were tasked, we'd spent, as I'd mentioned, a lot of time talking about prescriptions and what do we do to help cover the cost? What do we do if we get hit with some very high prescriptions? Today, the county's prescription plan does not have reinsurance. Reinsurance are referred to as stop loss, sometimes stopgap. It has a lot of different names, but you don't have reinsurance on your prescriptions, and we obviously, following the papers, knowing what's happening with healthcare, prescription drug costs, particularly in the specialty arena, there's a lot of scary statistics coming down the road, and we have been seeing over the last few years some very high cost prescriptions that we had outlined. So we have a couple different ways of going after this. What you have on page 5 of your kit is a standalone reinsurance or stop loss proposal. Okay, so this is not through Blue Shield. Okay, this is an outside carrier. RX Reens, Gerber is the underwriter behind it. And this more or less would attach to your existing prescription program. Okay? The natural time to add this, I mean, you could do it at any point, but the natural time to add this would to have it align with your health and prescription renewal. So that would end up being December 1st. Okay? So a few things, we want to spend some time on this. This is, Avenue 1. Route 1 is to again, attach a standalone reinsurance program on top of your existing prescription program. So in detailing this, the first line you're going to see on there is lasers. Okay, it says none. We're going to put that in bigger context as we talk about self-funding a little bit later. But as of right now, what that means is they're not going to hold anything against your existing employees. They're not going to set a different deductible or a higher payment level against any of your existing employees. So this plan here would go as is for everybody who is insured. There's two components. You're going to see a couple areas that are highlighted, and we can kind of do it here with the counter. Specific stop loss. Okay? What this means is any individual member, and not just an employee, but a member, could be a spouse, could be a child. Once that person hits $100,000 of prescription claims. Now again, that seems like, wow, a crazy number, $100,000 of prescription claims. But what was the one, Kurt, that we were just dealing with?
We just had one 3-4 weeks ago now, $600,000. One child, 12 injections.
Yeah. It's
A drug called Incondi's 1. There's some press on it. It is FDA approved, but it's still in testing. It's one of those types of prescriptions that when you self-fund, you can put certain contract language into your SPV around prescriptions like that that haven't been fully out in the market for a period of time. You could exclude them and look for other alternatives. But it's a very expensive one. Another very expensive one is called Cerezyme. Cerezyme would be used to treat a young dependent for a disease called Gaucher's disease. And the scary thing with these prescriptions that are coming out in the specialty drug end is most of the very expensive ones are injectables, and the dosage is determined by weight. So as those in both cases, they're both dependent children, as they grow, so does the dosage. $600,000 on each one. Our estimate from an actuarial standpoint of what in predictive modeling the plan, what's that going to do to their plan in 4 years from now? We think it could be close to turning from 600 to close to $1 million for 12 injections.
Yeah, so that's, you know, putting it in context, those are the ones that you want protection against, right? And there's a lot of them there, and the specialty drug trends are continuing to go up. It's expected to make up a much larger chunk of your healthcare costs moving forward, not just yours. It's not specific to the county. It's all employers, all facets of group size. So $100,000, once you cross over $100,000 for one member's claims, again, could be not a family in total, could be any one particular member. Thereafter, that's where the reinsurance can kick in. Okay, so specific refers to the individual, and it refer to the member. Once you cross over 100,000, the next line, that person would have reinsurance up to another $1 million. Okay, so $1 million beyond the 100, so 1.1 basically for that individual.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Now, contract type 1212, all that simply means is if we go with your plan year, that would be for any prescriptions that were incurred, filled, okay, let's say, from December 1st of 17 through November 30th of 18, incurred and paid in that 12-month period. Okay? We typically don't need a much longer period than that. Prescriptions are linked up, pharmacies are linked up electronically, right, with the PBMs. They pay very quickly. In other words, there's not a big lag like you're going to see on the hospital side, surgery and things like that. I don't want to breeze through this, though, so this is important, specific, because there's other components to this. Questions? Yeah.
What has our experience been, over the last 2, 3, 4 years in terms of specifically related to the stop loss, $100,000? Have we gone beyond it in the past?
Not that we've seen. Yes, you have buried inside, your prescription claims. We could certainly report on that, but at the last report that we had for a 12-month period, you had plenty of the $4,000 and $5,000 variety per month ones. Those, again, believe it or not, are just more common. There's a number of those. We haven't seen the 600,000 variety. Okay, those haven't been sitting out there, and we did share your claim experience with the carriers so that they can quote appropriately.
Some of the bigger ones right now would be like Harvoni. That would be 3 dosages, sometimes 4. 3 dosages would run from 80 to 85,000.
That's a drug for specifically what?
Hepatitis. And we're seeing pretty good odds, a lot of that, because the commercials, they basically say this could be in you. So people are going and getting tested, and it may be dormant in them, or they may be not. There might be certain levels. It's not fully, a full-blown hepatitis case, and then so they treat it, and it's expensive. We usually see per self-funded group of, on an average case, maybe a 500-person group self-funded. We would see a couple of those hit a year now, where we never used to see that at all.
Excluding these exotic drugs from a plan, is that that's legal? I mean, if you were to exclude the hepatitis drug and someone has hepatitis and you can substantiate that there's a cure and your plan does not include it, where does that go?
I don't think you want to exclude specialty drugs from the plan, but what I think that you want to do inside the plan is specialty drugs that have alternatives. You could, for them, you could make step therapies into them so they go through certain steps. I don't think you want to, for lack of a better word, say play God and say we're going to not let this one have this drug and vice versa. But I think that, specialty drugs that may be in a testing phase and there's not a lot of clinical data on them, you may want to structure some of your SPD language in there to protect the plan. And then, when I say protect the plan, the medical spend that's out there today, if you look at it, most plans double every 7 to 8 years. If your health care plan were to double in another 7 years, it would be an extraordinary, large sum of money that the county would have to pay. So we want to put as many protections in place or as many funding mechanisms in place that allow you to, contain that as much as we can.
Thank you.
Supervisor Stroud, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Matt, when an individual exceeds the 100,000 stop loss and they reinsure for the 1 million annual, what does that mean, the reinsure? That means it's going to cost us more money?
So the reinsurance means somebody else is picking it up. Okay, so if you have a $600,000 claim, you'd pay the first 100. Reinsurance carrier picks up the $500,000 balance.
All right, so the self-funded part is the first part?
Yes.
The 100?
Yes. Yep. Now, it's not, this is year one. So, getting into, and we're, lasers. So what a laser is, we have to think about, think forward with this. When you go self-funded, you don't have this scenario now in the fully insured world. Fully insured world presents its own challenges, which we'll discuss, but on the self-funded area, you have lasers. So what they would suggest, lasers are there to protect the reinsurer against known risk. So if that $600,000 claim is expected to continue, and it's weight-based, and it's going to be there for the next 5 years, and they can project that, what it's going to be, they may put a laser, what they call a laser, on that individual, that when you get to renewal, that individual may have a $250,000 specific deductible, and everybody else in the group would have $100,000. So that's one protection that they have under most stop reinsurance programs. So looking at year 2, it's something to be conscious of.
One thing to point out, though, on a fully insured contract, insured really just means deferred.
Yes.
Okay? And that's very important that everybody understands that. So if you have a large, because you're 100% credible, so they're not going to charge you a premium next year that's below what your expected claims are. So, you get quoted a price on a fully insured plan, say it's $2 million, and you have an Exondes claim in, it's $2.6 million now. Well, it's fully insured, so the insurance company paid, the $2.6 million, you only paid $2 million. But next year, your premium, all things being the same, is going to be $2.6 million plus trend, plus margin, plus taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So you're probably going to be paying a $3 million premium the next year. So just remember that insured just means deferred on a high-cost claim year.
The reinsurance really allows us to provide more coverage at a much higher level for our employees. In other words, that if we didn't have the reinsurance, I'm not sure we would accept that risk at those levels. But with the reassurance, the additional insurance allows us to cover that cost at those higher levels. And it is translated into the premium, of course, but the actual premium. So that's a question of affordability. But for the reinsurance, if we wanted to insure at those levels, we'd have to certainly assume that risk at those levels.
Yeah, being that you're self-insured now, if a $600,000 prescription is approved by Blue Shield today, the county is the reinsurer for that today. We're trying to transfer some of that risk to another party.
Transferring it, they're also raising, double.
Yes. Yeah.
That was my...
So does everybody understand that?
It was a little difficult to hear Chairman Conover, just FYI up here. That's okay.
My only point was that the reinsurance, it always becomes a question of affordability, of course, but it allows us to look at numbers like this.
Yes.
That was my only point.
Yep.
One thing that I think should be pointed out to the county is, and we said it in prior meetings, that we're very concerned about prescription drugs standing on its own now because of these high cost prescriptions that in the specialty drug market. Right now it's expected, typically right now when you look at medical and drug typically makes up somewhere around 20% of medical spend. Drug is expected to make up 50% of medical spend by 2019, beginning of 2020. And of the drug spend itself, specialty drug makeup has always been down in the low teens, and below that years ago. Now it's up near 30%. Specialty drug spend is expected to make up 45 to 50% of your entire drug spend by 2019, 2020. So that's staggering numbers. So there is a cliff that's coming. So when we look at the county, we think it's extremely important that we put in some protections in place to kind of ward off some of that expense if some of these specialty drugs hit. And there's two ways to do it. The way that we're showing you on the screen right now is a stop loss specifically for just standalone RX. It's more efficient than what you have right now, but it's not the most efficient way to do it. So we talk about self-funding your medical program too and educating you on that. This is a great step to it, but if we were to self-fund your medical program, then we could buy one stop-loss policy that encapsulates the medical program and your prescription program. And why is that a benefit? I'll tell you. So say the same example, you have a $100,000 specific stop-loss up there, okay? In that particular example, if 75,000 of it came from the medical side, 75,000 would count towards that if it was all inclusive. Then that person would only need another 25,000 on the prescription side before it attached and was reinsured. Right now, with what we're showing to you, which is still more inefficient than what you have, because what you have right now is nothing, all right? But right now, the way it stands, the only way that they can hit that stop loss is by drug itself. But if the two are combined, that member certainly has medical spend too. So if that person had $200,000 of medical spend, it doesn't matter. We're still waiting for them to hit the 100 over here on the drug end. So you're losing some efficiency there. That being said, though, it's still, what we're showing you here is better than where you're at right now because you have no protection. And I say is better in a case where a large drug spend hits.
Thank you for that clarification. Supervisor Bremer, you had a question?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I understand your point about the efficiencies of combining them both, and you did speak to us before about that risk. I thought we had a resolution saying that we did want some sort of reinsurance of the stop loss on the medication side.
You did. And that's why we're
Yeah,
showing you.
and that's this.
Okay.
But I'm saying that's better than what you have now because you have nothing for the drug coverage at all. Nothing protects you. So if you had a $600,000 spend right now on one drug, the county has to pay it. This policy up here that Matt is showing, after $100,000, the other $500 would be reinsured. Okay? But no medical spend counts towards that. Only drug spend.
So the big show, right, if we want to go self-funded, self-insured, we can't really do that midstream. You know, that would happen December 1st. So this is, like I mentioned, this is kind of option A. You know, just to cover, give you some reinsurance, give you protection, better protection than what you have, and you can decide whether you want to go this route. I think the long term, I could envision this being an option if you say, we're not ready for self-funding yet. We want to go one more year to collect claim data, which was mentioned in the previous meeting. We want to get one more year under our belt, have you guys analyze it, have Jaeger and Flynn analyze it, make the determination and a hard recommendation one way or the other. If that's the case, if it's kind of a more or less a renew as is scenario, you may want to seriously consider that. Okay, to kind of bolt it to your existing prescription plan above and beyond. So did you have a question, Mr. Sokol?
I do.
Supervisor Bramer.
I'm being a little bit dense. So we didn't buy the insurance yet, because we had to have mid-plan, is that for the medication?
Correct. This is your first look at it.
Does that answer your question, Claudia?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. What do people think about?
Are you looking for committee input, Claudia?
Yeah. On his last question about, are we ready or should we wait another year?
So Supervisor Bramer's bringing up to the committee what your pleasure would be at this point, or are you prepared to start talking about that? I mean, I think that's the point of today's meeting is to have some discussion regarding this option. Correct, Matt?
Yes, and let me, I'll go a little further with it because there is another component to this,
Okay.
but also we have to look at it in the perspective of your entire healthcare spend, and if you go this direction, where does it impact? How do you cover it? Where do you put it? You know, so I'm going to go into that, but we'll stay on this page for now. So that was specific, remember, is individual. Okay, we're following the individual on that. If an individual, one member has a claim above $100,000, reinsurance kicks in. Part 2 of this reinsurance contract is aggregate. That doesn't necessarily follow the individual. That follows if, let's just say, nobody hit 100,000, but everybody had a lot of claims still, but nobody happened to cross over 100,000. There's protection above that. It's not massive protection. Okay, we can't remove this. They don't allow us to do it. But as an example, this number here, about 3/4 of the way down the page, this is an aggregate or a total attachment point. So if your claims in aggregate, in total, exceeded, in this case, just under 2.8 million, right now, for reference, you're running at about 2 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, okay? Before we hit trend and before we, inflate it for next year. If you crossed over that, the reinsurer would provide an extra $100,000. Okay? So we could make the argument with this that it may not be worth having that on there. We do at times, but when you have one, you have to have the other under these arrangements. So that's what aggregate protection is.
What's $100,000 per individual?
Right, sorry, 100,000 per individual, max to the 2 million.
Your
Yes.
spend is 100,000 there. So they don't give you credit for the reinsured portion above. Up top, you had $100,000 spec if it was a $600,000 claim. They only give you $100,000 towards that. They don't give you the other $500. So just want to make sure everything's clear.
Correct. So you've probably all jumped ahead to this already, naturally. The cost is $191,000, which represents about 1.5% of your total rolled up prescription, and not just your prescription claims, it's medical and prescription. It's about what it represents. And we'll show you, again, this is option 1. If you turn the page, we kind of break it down and what it would look like if you decided to do it, how you would put it in your, attached to your current policy. Okay? So on the left-hand side, your self-funded RX prescription premium equivalents. Okay? So right now, as part of your rates, before it gets put together for payroll deductions, $143 is what's, as I mentioned earlier, is what the estimated, that's the premium equivalent. That number is designed to cover admin, expected claims throughout the year. This is what it is today. $143.26, which is then added to medical to come up with a total rate. Medical and then admin. Employee and child is $293, families $411. We would expect from what we're looking at so far, projected renewal, we're cushioned enough today on the premium equivalents to probably keep those about where they are going into next year's renewal. Okay? Now, just to give you a sense, if you would say, and again, but we know again right now there's no reinsurance on that. This next column over says projected renewal PEs, that's premium equivalents, as of June. If you broke that 191,000 up based on your membership, who's in what bucket, it's going to add about $11 to a single rate or so. Okay, you can see the differences as we roll down, and that's going to come up. So to your existing prescription equivalents, it adds about 7.8. That's not 7.8% of your entire health care cost. That's just of prescriptions. Questions on that part?
I have a question, Matt. Is that then the increased cost to the employee or collectively the employee and the county?
Yeah, that's not split up yet.
Okay.
That's just the total what it would look like if you added the reinsurance into your premium.
Okay.
So everything we've been talking about so far has been your existing scenario, putting reinsurance on top of it. An alternative, not suggesting necessarily that you go this way, but an alternative to consider is on the right-hand side. It is more expensive, but it would be to stay with Blue Shield, and instead of keeping your self-insured prescription program, moving it back into fully insured. Okay, so that's option B. So it would be, in that case, Blue Shield takes all the risk above the stop loss, okay, above the reinsurance. They basically are reinsuring it on their own. And if you have a really bad year, the premium equivalents, this is what they would charge you. It is also, as Kurt was mentioning earlier, it's one combined reinsurance program. Now you can see the delta here. They're going to charge you $161. Right now we are charging back to the employees as an equivalent rate, $143. So there's obviously a cost for them to do that and to take on that risk and to cover under their reinsurance.
So the estimated, the projected renewal PE as of June 17 of $2.439 million. If we did the first option, it would, the cost would be $2.630, and if we went all the way to the right, it would be $2.663, correct?
Yes. Yep. And all the way to the right is you're getting to some degree out of the big risk game, and you're giving it back to Blue Shield. Okay. You could make the argument it's a step backwards, certainly, because you are self-funded currently on your prescriptions, but the only advantage you get with that is you're covering your risk. You're covering the bigger risk. Okay? And as Kurt mentioned, it's short-term, because if you have very high costs, very high claims in a given year, what happens in year 2? Right? Big increases. Okay?
That would be $230,000 or so.
Right. Before we deal with the medical.
Before we deal with that.
Yes.
That's where you're going next with the specialist.
Yeah, into option 3. Yeah, option 3. So, either one of these scenarios, it does add cost naturally. You're going into the game, into the renewal with the cost factors that you have to consider. We have some interesting interesting things, interesting challenges, I should say, coming up to 2018. I'll just speak to one of them, and one challenge is that last year there was a delay in the federal health insurance tax. The delay saved county and every business about 2.5%. Blue Shield built in a little bit. So we're estimating this year going into, if you stay fully insured on your medical, that tax is being reinstituted. And now again, on a federal level, who knows, right? Things could easily change between now and when we get there, but that 2.3% is going to get built back into the renewal as a starting point. It's just a tax. It hits the carriers, and it immediately kind of flows downhill and hits your renewal. So that 2.3% on a fully insured plan, that is not, this is a big one, that is not subject to, self-insured plans are not subject to that. So that's the equivalent for the county of about $230,000. Now you're not going to get a bill for it directly, it's just wrapped into your premium rates. Okay, so that's a sneaky one that is coming back that we really can't do much about in a fully insured environment. Before we go to, renewing that discussion on this going self-funded, we went over a lot, these two options. Option A was attaching a reinsurance plan to your existing program. B is giving it all back to Blue Shield at an extra cost. Any questions on either scenario? Giving it all back to Blue Shield with the potential tax coming up, it's going to make it harder at renewal.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we're going to be up, it's up, right. We're already swimming upstream a little. Yeah.
Supervisor Merlino?
To me, this is a little confusing. My question is to you. You're our carrier representative. I hired you last year. I would like to know what you think. Because what happens with all the ladies and gentlemen here, we go with A, blows up in our face in 3 or 5 years from now. The ones that are still around, they take the rap for it. Is there, you being our carrier, are you going to give us some recommendations which might be the best way for us to go? It's hard for all of us to sit here and say, let's go with A, let's go with B, and let's go with C.
Yep.
Because there's really no answer what A, B, or C is going to be next year, the year after, the year after that.
No, it's a good point. Yes, we're going to give you some conditional recommendations, okay? Because
But we need somebody to blame now.
yeah, no, I think we understand that. Yes. So, kind of to Kurt's point, okay. Some of this is, it's conceptual. All right. So, if you in your current arrangement, if you kind of, there's no, I guess to sum some of this up is there's no place to hide if you have bad rates, bad experience. It's delayed under your current medical plan. If you have a bad year, it catches up pretty soon, and you experience higher rates that get passed on to the county, and you pay your share, and the employees pay their share. Under a self-funded arrangement, there is savings. We can knock 2.3% off the top. That's a given. There's margin, there's trends, there's a number of different areas that you can save in. Kurt will talk about areas that you can do some claim avoidance programs. We can set some things up to avoid claims before they happen. Can't do that under your fully insured arrangement today. It's just not really there. So having said that, though, I mean, self-funding, if you look at it compared to fully insured, for a group of your size, over time, we're going to look at this over a 5-year period, 3, 5, 10-year period, it's almost always going to be better. It's hard to find a scenario where it will be worse because, again, the insurance company's not going to give you a pass. With that said, you're going to have, what's a 2 out of 10, right? We're going to have a couple years out of 10 where it's going to look and feel, you're going to have some high claims. It's going to be bumpy at times, self-funding, because you're going to have some claims that are going to hit you. But again, you have to go back to the conceptual part of it is you pay for it anyway, just in a different way under the current arrangement. Yes.
Supervisor Stroud.
Sorry.
You said that we could include medical into the prescription and to the stop loss. Have you done an evaluation of that?
For self-funding?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we have some preliminary. Looks at it on the last page and what we anticipate that the savings is going to be with it. You know, again, and we may have mentioned it at last time, the savings is there, we believe. The longer-term savings will be there. To Gene's point, you know, who gets blamed if you have those bad years and those bumps? There'll be bumps coming. Hear it loud and clear from me. You're going to have some bumpy years in the future of self-insured. That's just the nature of how it works. When you may question, geez, we had 5 cases of $800,000 claims and a couple lasers. You know, again, it's back to you would have hit that. And under a self-funding arrangement, the committee will have to be pretty involved in managing that program. You know, awareness of claim management, some of the tools that Kurt's going to talk about. It's a different process.
Supervisor. I'm sorry, Supervisor Merlino.
I'm not trying to be critical, but
Understood.
in 12 years, I've never seen this, that you're doing a better job informing us of what's going on. And yet, I think in the last 5 years, we've made $1 million in that general area. I don't know exactly. You know, so everything that we did back in the last 5 years has worked. But you're kind of scaring me saying, be prepared. Is it because of health insurance around the country, in our country here, has changed, and the new drugs that are coming out try to say people live longer or more expensive? That's why we're listening to this kind of stuff now?
Yeah,
It's going to be different in the next 5 years than it was in the last 5 years.
yes, that's true. There's some things that there's been at your size level, a lot of employers have already made that move. You would not be, you know, on the private side, absolutely. At your size level, a great majority across the country have moved to self-funding. One of the big pushes to go to self-funding was the Affordable Care Act, because the Affordable Care Act did some good things, but it also brought us a fairly heavy amount of taxes that are, again, it hits the insurance company, and it practically that same day rolls down to the rates. They don't retain it, they can't. Okay, so a lot of employers, smaller employers, have made that move and are making that move to self-funded plans, captive programs, to avoid taxes and take on a little bit more risk with it. So yes, part of our job is to give you ways to protect yourself from risk. Right now, there's some savings on the self-funded side where this, you know, we promise to analyze this for you and to look at it, but we're also coming at it from the risk avoidance perspective. We see some risk under your current arrangements that we want to advise you on.
We appreciate that. Any additional questions at this time?
Answer your question.
Got no choice.
We have a recommendation. I don't think we got a recommendation yet, have
I
we?
mean, would you say that to all of us sitting here, Ms. Bramer brought it up about a half hour ago, is it reasonable for us to wait a year and calculate what would have happened if we did it or didn't do it? Just, I mean, you know, it's a tough thing for us to do, to spend, put this out, because this, you know, we all learn, you know, what supervisors voted on 10 years ago was having a disaster this time either. You know, it's tough for us to know. We're not all health insurance scientists or engineer scientists. So we do the best we can to vote on things to move them forward, and then you get beat up on them 5 years from now and say, oh, you voted for it, and look how bad it was. But I guess that's part of the responsibility we have to take on. Like with having him around, he helps us out a lot.
Chairman Cotto?
No, yeah, I'm not trying to be sarcastic, I'm just trying to think about...
Understand 100%.
I mean, I know myself personally, I won't be here 5 years from now, but, you know, a lot of things happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago that happened in this county. We're paying for it now, or we're success now, so it's one of those choices.
Mhm.
Conover?
I think when we get to the final page, I think some of this may be more clear. I think that in terms of which options they're going to recommend, is whichever certain things. In other words, we full self-insured prescription drugs is for self-insured. That's what you were saying. Yeah. I have some very direct recommendations that I would make, yes. I think that start to see the implications of this on
Sure.
Yes.
And Chairman Sokol?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gene, I think these wonderful people at Jaeger and Flynn gave us that middle option, which was not to go fully insured, but not to go self-insured, but there's a middle road that we could take that would prevent us from maybe getting publicly humiliated by the media. I think that's what your concern is.
I'm not here, I'm just emphasizing that.
Right.
Because it's tough for us to know
But-
which way to go.
right,
We
but
have to go
ultimately-
by what they recommend.
Correct.
That's what I'm at.
But ultimately, this is a gamble, and I'm not a gambling man, but this is a gamble. So,
I'm a gambling man, and I've lost a
Well,
lot
he
of
was.
times, so I don't know.
Well, again, perspective. It's, you have a liability today, and you will in the foreseeable future with your existing health plan. Now, on the fully insured Blue Shield plan, that's a measured liability. We know under the Blue Shield portion, the medical portion, I should say, we know if you have a worst case scenario year, you're going to pay X. That's it. You don't pay X plus. On the prescription side today, we don't have that comfort. So that's there is no ceiling today. So that's what we're trying to potentially give you recommendations to how do you plug that gap? How do you fill that? And yes, if you play this out over time, self-funding is going to win over time. Again, you're going to have some bumps, and we're going to have to, as a group, talk about how you want to organize and look through this data and make decisions on self-funding and plan recommendations in the future, because it's becoming, as you already know, hard to sustain over time. So it'll need some action, obviously, over the years. So if page 7, I'm not going to spend much time on. That's I'm going to jump to page 18, which is page 7 is just how we develop our prescription recommendations. But page 8, this is the same document that we presented in our last meeting. Gives you a sense. Whoa, I did something. There you go. Gives you a sense of what the first year savings could be. First year. Now, this is considered, it's an immature claim projection, but there's a couple of things here. You're going to see in the bottom, again, I know if you're like me, your head jumps right to the bottom of the page and you see the numbers first, and then you work backwards. So, this is showing $900,000 of savings. 9% ballpark, something like that. There's a lot of, it may be more, it may be less. Again, we know 2.5% or 2.3% of it or so is made up of tax. We know that's hard. That's a hard number. But what we would say up top, if we were to try to guess at this point, not knowing, so here we are, mid-June, you have to project the rest of the year out and then try to project trend, healthcare inflation into the next year. So that number on the top, annual medical premium, if we were to estimate now what claims would look like next year with Blue Shield, it'd be about 10.2. That's if you stay in your current arrangement. prescriptions are going to come in around that, if we're inflating it a little to protect yourself, to protect you, it's going to come in 2.2. You have a medical reimbursement plan for people who chose a high deductible health plan. We're reimbursing them some of their deductibles. That's small. We don't have an enormous amount of people on there, so that's only worth about $10,000, and every person that's there, just as a reminder, is saving them and you money. So annual fully insured cost is going to be estimating, just call it $12,500. Going self-funding below, the next box below, okay, everything in here, self-funded medical and RX. Okay, pulling it all under one stop-loss reinsuring umbrella, projecting the annual claims, medical and RX, at 9.12. Now, an important component, that's why I said year one earlier, these are considered immature claims. So if an employee had a hospitalization on November 15th, that's covered under the old contract. These claims are only going to start December 1st, January 1st, those first few months. And claims are generally light in the beginning because you're not pulling in all those old claims. You're not pulling in the run-out. So if anybody has experienced hospitalization claims, the reason I bring that up, in the last, recently, you may have found that the date of your hospitalization, surgery, or whatever, you don't get billed that day. You get billed how many weeks later? See some head shakes. Sometimes months. Has anybody experienced that? Takes some time. So, in other words, you're not having any of that lag, that run-out coming into your plan. So, reason I'm saying that, immature claims, year one, there's some savings to be had on your claim number. That's why it looks kind of light. We accounted for the same medical expense reimbursement plan at 10, and then you have ASO, that's your administration cost, and your stop loss. So again, administration is you need somebody to pay the claims, produce ID cards, manage the program. Okay, when you roll, and in this particular scenario, the stop loss was set at $100,000 for medical and RX combined. Comes to 10.5 when you roll it all up. So you're saving nearly $2 million, but we have to cut a check to Blue Shield for about $1 million, which was part of your agreement when you went in the door with them years ago on this program, and that's to cover those run-out claims. They pay for claims, that hospitalization claim, as I mentioned, in November, that ends up paying in March. They're on the hook for that. Okay, so that estimate of $900,000, year one, guarantee one thing, it won't be exactly that number, it'll be higher or lower, but there's some savings to be had with it.
Yeah, I think it'd be
Supervisor Bramer. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just
Go
going to
ahead.
say, I think it would be important to point out, though, that these numbers are based off of Blue Shield's minimum premium plan, but the maximum liability, okay? You all know that you have a minimum premium plan, but there's a max liability number. If the max liability number was $8 million, if claims were $9 million, you're insured, okay? If claims are $7 million, you have an extra $1 million of surplus, and you are all familiar with your surplus as we've talked about the minimum premium contract. This projection is based off of the maximum liability number, because that's the only known number that we have. So if you ran a $500,000 surplus next year, that $900,000 of savings would become $400,000 of savings. All right, so because you do have a contract that right now that allows you, there is a mechanism in place for you to benefit from a good claim year right now. But for purposes of trying to be able to show you what a projection would look like, I think that we have to work off of what the maximum liability number is on your current contract. Because the surplus could be any number month to month.
Supervisor Bramer. Then
Thanks, Chairman. Can you project out for us the cost for 2018 to 2019 if we stayed again for another year, and then project out if we had changed what the 2018 to 2019 for the second year of our fully or self-funded would be? Because you're giving us this immature claims year, which you said is going to be a good year for us. what will it look like in year 2 compared to if we stayed with the fully insured thing for 2 years?
We could give you some information based on, we'd have to use what we see today's numbers. Of course, so much in healthcare, it's hard to project that far ahead. But if we used a static number, a constant number, we could give you an idea what year two of a self-funding program could look like. So it would be mature claims,
Right.
basically. So we could, those get us nervous though, because so much can happen and change in between, and I hate to put a number on that's too high or too low, but we can try to give you some ballparks.
Supervisor McDevitt?
Yeah, the administrative cost, who does that? Our
Blue Shield.
They would do the administrative.
Unless we shop them out
Uh-huh.
and try to pick another TPA to use, but
Okay.
I think the county's been happy with their service. I don't see a reason to necessarily leave them. We can certainly vet that in the future, though.
But I mean, if we stayed with Blue Shield, the employees wouldn't notice the difference.
Okay. Good.
Chairman Conover?
The payout, the request, is that one and done, or is that over a number of years?
The run-out, the terminal liability? Yeah, just the question, if you didn't hear it, the payout, that $1 million payout, you are accrued for it, my understanding, and it's a one-time deal. So and it's not variable, so if Blue Shield ends up paying in run-out claims $1.3 million, your liability is already capped at the $1 million. On the other hand, if they only pay out $800,000, they keep the $2.
Supervisor McDevitt?
Just one last question. The stop-loss deductible in the self-funded plan at $100,000, assuming maybe kind of the worst of scenarios in which you had a couple of employees that got involved with some of these exotic drugs, and all of a sudden that number was $400,000 or $500,000 per employee. Is there a way to address that, or is that just?
So the way it would work, that first year, each of them the county would only be on the hook for the first 100. Any amounts over that year one, the reinsurer kicks in. Year 2, though, the way it gets addressed is the insurance company looks at it. They require and request data to come from Blue Shield with prognosis on it, and they'll look at that and see if it's ongoing. If it's ongoing and those claims are expected to stay at those levels, that's the laser conversation that Matt came out with. He said, hey, we're going to hit you with lasers. Now, what we do at that point is your stop-loss premium up there makes up, I don't know what the percentage is, it's probably 10% roughly of the total medical spend. So
Yeah, 5.
5 to 10%. I was looking at the $800,000 number. No, yeah.
Oh, right, 800,
841.
yep.
So close to 8 to 10% up there. So if you had a 30% increase that we had to project into claims because of lasers or because they increased your stop loss piece, your overall composite isn't 30% because that's just a very small portion of the overall spend in your plan. That composite might come down to a 10% increase, even though you had a 30% increase on the stop loss, because it's only 30% of 841, not 30% of 9 million.
Okay, yep.
Supervisor Brock?
Yeah, if I assume that our population, the total population that's insured, if it gets older, the insurance claims will go up, don't they?
Yes.
So if you were to look at our population going forward, is it getting older, getting younger? What's do you have any idea, or is there any way to?
Younger.
We compare it to Blue Shield's book of business. There are 500,000 or so members that they insure, and on average, your age is higher than their book of business average. A lot of that is tied to you insure a fair amount of retirees that are not on Medicare, so pre-Medicare retirees. So it's again the managing risk side of it. That's hard to control. But
What I'm thinking of is when you're trying to predict the future, we don't know when these new drugs are going to come in, but we can tell what kind of diseases generally you'll know the population will have.
Mhm.
I mean, you can make some kind of predictions if it's
Yep.
more favorable to do it now or to wait.
There are predictive modeling tools that we use that Blue Shield also helps us with in looking at, because they have the data on the claims before we can see them, before they, as they're trying to manage the claim, the individual member. But it gets back to, that is true, we can project, and these numbers are projected forward based on what claims have been paid, and projecting forward to what they would predict is coming in the next renewal cycle. But it's the same, I guess it's whether you stay fully insured and you defer it, and they charge you your rates, higher rates later, or you take on a little bit more of that risk on the front end with self-funding. In other words, you're going to have that employee either way. How do you manage them? Which way?
Chairman Conover?
I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So if you compare page 6 of 8 with 8 of 8, put them side by side. If you combine the two plans, the prescription drug and the funding, your projection here annually is 2.4 for the self-funded prescription drug, correct?
Yes, and that's our projection for your self-funded drugs either way.
But that's an insured, that's a reinsured, that's reinsured under this plan, with the reinsurance plan. In other words, it's...
Page 8?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's if you go,
Okay.
page 8 is self-funded, so both.
So for example, if we go to page 6 of 8 now, we see that in order to move to reinsurance under either option, either we self-insure or we go to Blue Cross, we'd be looking at about $2.630 million for the same plan.
Well, an important,
Are you see where I'm going with this?
I do, and I
also want to say, compare that number to what our current premium equivalents are, 2.439. So we're talking just drug now? Just drugs.
Yes,
I'm
just
looking at the
drug.
line item called self-funded prescription claims.
Right, so one distinction, and I'm glad you brought this up, the page 8, the prescription line of 2.2 million is projected claims. That's what a claim number would be. On page 6, the 2.439, those are the premium equivalents that we're charging, which are those are higher than what your expected claims are, so you're projecting and collecting enough to cover your projected claims.
Right, that's...
Yes.
Say that again. So I
You guys didn't understand that? The difference between the pages, you look at those two numbers, one is 2.439 million is what we're charging or collecting, setting a premium equivalent. That is supposed to be higher, that target is supposed to be higher than what the actual claims are. You want to set a number that's appropriate, charging back to the employees, budgeting on your behalf. That should ideally be covering your actual claims. So your premium equivalents come to 2.439. We're expecting claims to be at 2.2. That's a good ratio. So you're covering your liability is basically what it comes down to. The unknowns are the high costs, and obviously.
Supervisor Leggett?
Terminal liability, that's what we would pay Blue Shield.
If you leave them,
Yes.
or if you leave that contract. So, we also put on the agenda, we can go back and forth, but we wanted to spend a little bit of time, and Jean, this ties a little bit to your question of if we think about self-funding and you treat this health plan as something that needs to be addressed and managed, there are some unique opportunities and things that you can do as a self-insured employer, as an employer with a self-insured plan to help cost contain, as I mentioned. It's on, I'll go back to the agenda, where it sets on some of the, We want to do this first, advantages and disadvantages and some of the claim avoidance, and Kurt's going to handle some of that. You can come up here or go there, whatever you want.
Limping because I used my health care. I had knee surgery last week. Thanks, Matt. So, Matt talked candidly in the beginning about some of the advantages of the program. So a few of these points, the elimination of the carrier trend, you've heard already, elimination of the carrier margin. Typically inside the fully insured contracts on health care, there's 3 to 5% depending on the carrier that they build in for margin. So increase their profits, so to speak. Those are negotiations that we have with them to pull them back within underwriting adjustments to bring the rates down. So the advantage on the self-funded side of making the medical also self-funded is to just get rid of that whole discussion. There is no margin left in there. We're dealing with the insurance carrier in two aspects. One of them we're dealing with on the administration, which is just finding a network, and we're recommending, at this point we would stay with Blue Shield. We want, if you go self-fund on the medical side, we'd want a seamless transition to your employees. They wouldn't feel anything. They'd still have their Blue Shield cards. So that's important. But to be able to eliminate that, that's great. The elimination of the insurance carrier trend is key too. You're a 100% credible group. That means that you're large enough to stand on your own on claims. So when they look at your renewal, they base 100% of your renewal off of your own claims. There's no book rate in the background. So when you start thinking about self-funding, you start thinking about, okay, well, the carrier still has to take our contract and put it through their calc sheet. And inside their calc sheet, in addition to that 3 to 5% of margin that they've got in there, they've also got their fully insured carrier trend. So if the insurance carrier is trending at, we'll give an average number, a trend we're out there right now, it's between, depending on the carrier, 8 to 9, 9.5%. So we'll say 9. If the carrier's trending at 9%, well, when they do that calculation, they do it over a midpoint to midpoint basis. So they calculate your renewal, they take that 9% and they adjust it out over, depending on when they start the calculation, it's typically 16 to 18 months. So that 8, 9% turns into 12, 13% that goes into your renewal. Now, the reason that they have to do that is they're fully insured. They're in the game to make money. They don't want to lose money on cases. So on the fully insured side, you're paying all that fully insured trend. Well, the downside of that is if you're, the county has done fairly well the last several years. All right, last year was a little bit more of a blip than the previous years, but has trended pretty well. So if your trend as a county is 3% or 4%, you'd rather be having a calc going at 3 or 4% on your claims than, an adjusted trend trending out at 12, 13, 14%. Okay? So there's a lot that can be saved between trend and margin inside that self-funded contract. Matt talked about the ACA fees and taxes. Extremely important. Hey, it's another 2.3% that we are not going to give to the insurance company if we self-fund. We keep that. As it stands right now, your renewal will have an additional 2.3% guaranteed going into it, unless something happens, with the Affordable Care Act repeal piece there. And we're watching that. It's kind of moving a lot slower than everybody anticipated. Well, actually, I think we all anticipated it might move slow. But we're not there yet. Additionally, in the self-insured piece, there's claims avoidance tactics that are available. All right? So when we talk about claims avoidance, obviously the one way to avoid a claim before a claim happens is preventative type of care services, wellness programs. One of the things that we find a lot of our groups that we walk into before we start working with them, we pull a report, we get a data dump from the insurance carrier, and we find that even though that employer's paying for a family, depending on the plan design, $18,000 to $25,000 a year for one family, 30 to 30% of that employer's population is using the preventative services, getting their physicals, doing their mammograms, pap smears, PSAs. Only 25 to 30%. And those services in every contract since the Affordable Care Act came out are paid in full. There's no deductibles. There's no copays. They're paid in full. Yet only 25-30% are using it. So if you self-fund, you own your plan now. Right now on the medical side, we rent it. We take it off the shelf from Blue Shield. All right, we deal with their trends, their margin, et cetera, et cetera. If we self-fund the program as a county, we own the plan now. And because we own it, we want to take care of it a lot better, right? And one of the things that we want to do is make sure we have good education on preventative services or institute some wellness programs that actually have an impact on your claims. Now, other areas of claim avoidance tactics, it can be rather simple to talk about. I'll give you just a couple examples. There's many, many that we use. But so if somebody has end-stage renal disease, they have dialysis, right? And so when it comes to dialysis, you're eligible for Medicare, even if you're not disabled. End-stage renal disease, you're eligible for Medicare. Now, typically what happens when someone goes to a dialysis provider and they're like, hey, I have my company insurance, I got this letter in the mail, I'm eligible for Medicare. Typically the provider will say to them, well, don't take the Medicare, your group insurance is better. All right, well, why would they do that? Because they're going to receive the same care whether they're on Medicare or they're on the Blue Shield plan here, right? Why would they do that? Well, they would do that, the provider would do that because they get a better reimbursement than the Medicare reimbursement. All right? So when you look at that, you start thinking about, well, we have the ability to have Medicare pay this and carve this out of our group, but we can't force members to go to the Medicare side of things. So there's some tactics that you can use. You can't force them to take Medicare. It's up to them whether they take it. After 36 months, they'll go on to it, but you may be on the hook for up to, I think it's 36 months. The way you craft your SPD language can definitely make a difference there. In the private sector, some of the SPD language that we'll use is that dialysis is covered in your contract, but it's covered on the out-of-network piece. So there's a little additional deductible and coinsurance if they decide to continue on their company-sponsored employer program. But we let them know also within that SPD that they can go to Medicare, and it would be paid in full, and primary insurance would come in, or the secondary, meaning the employer's insurance, would come on and pay any of the gaps there. So what have you effectively done there? Well, that dialysis, maybe it's a $200,000 claim. We moved that $200,000 claim off of the private insurance plan into the Medicare program, which they're eligible for, and avoided that $200,000 spent. That's just one particular kind of an example. Not all companies choose to do that. Some companies do. But whether you choose to do it or not do it, you have the right to know that that's one of the things and the choices that you have within inside that self-funded program. Now, another claims tactic that we use, avoidance tactic that we use, is on the prescription drug side of things. We implement in several of our programs now a 4 and a 5-tier prescription drug benefit program. Why do we do that? We do that because of these specialty drugs that are out there. Most people don't know that this is available, but Big Pharma in the background carries significant coupons on prescriptions. And what I mean by that, so let's take Enbrel. Okay, Enbrel is a drug that's used for many purposes, but in a lot of cases like an MS type of treatment. Enbrel carries, I think it's a $12,000 to $13,000 coupon in the background. Okay, now in a fully insured market where you are right now, it never comes out because the member just goes, pays their copay to get the prescription. On a self-funded basis in the background, we start asking questions. Well, what are some other alternatives where we could get this prescription paid? So what happens is you know you have maximum out-of-pocket pieces on your contracts here. All right, that the member, if they hit this, then everything is paid in full after they hit this point. What we do is we inflate those out-of-pocket maximums on the drug piece itself. So when it goes to the insurance carrier, and we go out to, and we put this program in place in the background with the pharmaceutical vendor, whether it's Express Scripts, whether it's Caremark, We do this in the background with them. We actually can't do it with Express Scripts, so I misspoke there. We're trying to get them to do this, but we do it with Caremark and ProAct in the background. And what happens is when the member goes to the pharmacy, on their computer it now shows a higher out-of-pocket expense. It automatically triggers and goes to Big Pharma, and the coupon comes in. It takes $13,000 of spend out of that Enbrel drug, okay, that you, the county, or that self-employed employer would pay. And it's seamless to the member. They don't even know what's going on in the background, but we institute it. So that fourth tier and fifth tier, we use fourth tier and fifth tier because of where those drugs sit. It depends on how much maximum coupon dollars we can get back for you, the group. I know that's a lot. I know it's very confusing. The pharmaceutical, and my point is there's a lot of what I would call lack of transparency in the pharmaceutical benefit market. We take that lack of transparency out, and we fight back to try to put dollars back in. That's a claims avoidance tactic, all right? So that's two examples. I won't keep going on them, but we have several that we can do to start managing where your spend is within your contract. If we can take out, you know, $15,000 here, $20,000 there, $180,000 a dialysis here, it makes a huge difference long term for the self-insured employer. So claims avoidance is a big deal. Best-in-class vendor selection. On a self-funded plan, this is extremely critical. We do go out and we do vet the different components of it. So whether it be administration or the carve-outs, like the pharmaceutical end of it, or the utilization management end of it. There's programs out there. There's programs called Cancer Care Program, all right? And inside that program, they have a group of oncologists that work with the doctors that may be working with one of your employees that has cancer to make sure that they are getting the right treatments, because I just came from a conference. They put the stat, I think it's 35% of all the cancer treatments that are given are not the correct treatment the first go. So they work to narrow that down, and if they're not the correct treatment, that's more waste and more spend in your programs. So we put those mechanisms in place into your programs as well, so there's more assistance there. So best-in-class vendor selection is good because we build the program with you. No employee disruption we spoke about. The positive cash flow Matt spoke about. The pulling the RX claims under the stop-loss. So Gene, you asked, what's your recommendation? I'd be very, very clear in where I feel your recommendation is. And I think this is recorded, so everybody can look back on it 5 years from now if things go bad. The recommendation is right now that no matter what I recommend and Matt recommends, that you do put a protection in place with your prescription drug program. We do recommend that you at least put a stop loss on there if it's a standalone. I've been doing carve-out drug programs without stop loss for years and years and years. So I would take the medical plan, keep it fully insured, and every carrier and every other broker in the world knows this about me, and I would take the prescription plan and go out and self-fund it, and we won for years and years and years, just like you have. It was the right move with your previous consultant. I don't begrudge that one bit. It was the right move. But as you've gone down the road now and where prescription spend is going, it's, in my opinion and Matt's opinion, no longer the right move. I look at drug spend reports daily. It's scary, the costs that are coming over on these reports. It's only a matter of time. You have a huge population here. It's only a matter of time, and you're going to get hit with some of these big specialty drugs. I think it's time to act, put in place a protection. Do I think that you should go back to the self-funded world, or I'm sorry, to the fully insured world on the prescription? I don't feel that way. Because insured means deferred. You will pay it, you're just going to pay it the next year. And then we take away that mechanism to have savings in future years where you do have good claims. Because if you're fully insured, they don't give you a rebate at the end of the year because you ran below, their expected target. But in the self-funded world, you do. You run below that target, that's all money that you didn't spend out to the carrier. So I do believe self-insurance is the right move over the next 5-10 years. I will say this, though. If you feel as a group collectively that if Matt said 2 out of 10, it could be 2 to 3 out of 10 years where you're going to have bad claims. If year one's really bad and you're going to say, holy cow, we got to go back to fully insured, if that's where you feel your risk is, I don't recommend you self-fund at all. Not one bit. You got to get past that. You have to understand it's a long-term fix, not a short-term fix. We're looking at it as a 10-year fix. You are going to have 2 to 3 years of bad claims. It will happen. We just don't know what year it's going to. It could be 1 and 2. Do you bail? No, you stay the course, because once again, you go back to the insured market. Insured simply means deferred. You pay it the next year. It will catch up. Okay, so the recommendation is, there's 2. The first recommendation is, yes, we feel that you do need to have protection in place for prescriptions going forward. The second recommendation is that if you do not move to a self-funded medical program this year, that we recommend you strongly consider it, watch another year of claims, and strongly consider it for plan year 18-19. Reason being, as I said earlier, putting in a stop-loss policy on the prescription piece is more efficient than what you have now. But it's not the most efficient, because none of the medical claims go towards satisfying that either. And if somebody has prescription claims, they certainly have medical claims, and you'd rather have both of them going to satisfy the $100,000 than just one end of it going to satisfy the $100,000. So that's our recommendation. I've been very frank with Mike about this, that I think it's time that the county seriously considers the protection for the drug, though.
Treasurer Swan, did you have something?
Yeah, just as an update, for the last 5 years, this is what we've been planning for. This is what we've been building for, is to go to self-insurance. That's why the reserve has been built up, so that we have the $1 million to pay Blue Shield to get out. We have on top of that enough cash flow, I see cash flow up there, to take care of if next year becomes a hammer year. There's enough money in there so that it won't come out of the actual budget of the county. So we've got a fallback amount of money in case we have that bad year in year one. And the cameras are on, and I'm going to go, Kurt, it's time to pull the trigger. It really is.
Are you looking for action today, Mike, or in what time frame are you hoping to have it?
My recommendation would be to go to self-insurance completely for 2018. Medical and prescription.
Supervisor Leggett?
That was my...
Oh, that was it. Okay. Supervisor Bramer?
So, I would like to ask Supervisor Thomas his opinion.
I agree with what the Treasurer says. We've gone from community rating, it took us a few years to get experience rating and to find out what our claims actually are. And then we went to the minimum premium, built up our reserve. We'd have the money to buy out Blue Shield or pay off the run out. And so this is what we've been working for.
Treasurer Swan?
One other thing I'd like to add, correct me if I'm wrong, but for 17, we used a little bit of that reserve to pay the rate down, didn't we?
You did.
Okay. So if we go into 18, to keep that rate reasonable, we're going to have to use a little bit of that reserve again. Most likely, okay? So basically what we're doing is we're spending down our cushion going forward. That's one of the reasons why I feel that my recommendation would be go to self-insurance in 18, because if we keep putting it off, we keep spending down that cushion.
Good. Supervisor Leggett?
And that cushion is because rate increases were this, and we spent down something like that.
Well, yeah, what happened was, the plan was to go to self-insurance, so to do that, we need 2 things. One, we needed to have $1 million to buy out Blue Shield, and we needed to have a cushion when we jumped into it,
okay? So Capital, who was working with us at the time, kept those rates. We were building a reserve every year, okay? More money was being put into that reserve every year, employee money, county money, to build the cushion, so that at some point in time, we can make this jump. I think now's the time.
And when you say 18, does that mean December 18? So renew one more year fully insured?
I would say...
So just because your renewal's December,
Technically...
so December 17, you're recommending that?
Yes, renewal. I'm sorry, I'm talking for 2018, we're self-insured.
You might want to let them know what that balance is right now, plus or minus.
Well, if you take out the million, it's about 4.3 maybe, which will give us, my feeling is a good cushion if we have, and okay, I agree with these people 100%. The look at it that I've done, we're going to have a couple, 3 years where we're going to get some horrendous claims. You can't avoid it, okay? But everybody that I've talked to that's gone to self-insurance has stayed there. If everybody's staying there, it's got to be something that's worthwhile.
And if you go down that route, you will, from a stop-loss perspective, that does put you into the most efficient stop-loss because drug and medical work together towards that stop-loss point.
So at this point, I guess what I'm wondering is the pleasure of the committee. We, of course, can wait until our June 29th Personnel and Finance meeting and have a vote then. If you feel you have sufficient information tonight, of course, the motion could be made to move forward tonight. It's just in terms of how the committee feels today. Don't all speak at once. Supervisor Simpson.
I guess it would depend on how much time you guys need to prepare to, be ready for December renewal.
Yeah, as Matt mentioned, I think if we're going to go to a self-funded program on the medical side and we're going to pull in the stop-loss, we would really like to have final decisions and it's a go before the end of August, so mid-August.
So I would recommend, the committee would like to wait till July, have the final thought.
Well, our next Personnel and Finance is on 6/29. Supervisor McDevitt.
Yeah, I think I would concur with our treasurer, Swan, and but I would like to kind of dream about it for a couple of days, So,
I'm with you, Peter. I didn't say that, but...
Yeah, I don't want any nightmares,
Yeah.
So it's just, I think I concur. I'd just like to meditate about it for a weekend, whatever,
Is that acceptable to the committee? We'll table this until our June meeting and our June 29th meeting, and at that point, you've had sufficient time to review it, ask any questions to our experts in the room, and be prepared to make a vote during the Personnel and then Finance meeting on the 29th, and that should give them sufficient time if the pleasure of the committee is to move forward and push it to the full board in July.
Sounds good.
That sounds all right? Great. We certainly appreciate your time and information today. Thank you, and of course to the treasurer and our budget officer for bringing this forward and making sure we're taking a look at it. Are there any other items that need to come before the committee today? Hearing none, could I have a motion to adjourn? Made by Supervisor Leggett, seconded by, I see our friend Supervisor Dickinson, who's a member of the committee, seconded the adjournment. All those in favor? Opposed? This meeting is closed. Do I have to do it for finance too, or both? No, go ahead. I think they meant it for both.
I think
Right? Do I have to close it for finance? I'm sorry, we also need a motion to close the finance meeting.
Planning on going there.
I would like to thank Madam Chair Seaver for covering for me for the first few minutes, but I would like to get a motion to adjourn, please, for finance. Motion made by Supervisor Simpson, second by Supervisor Frazier. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
It was awesome.
I think this